U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan has drawn the ire of China. While the United States says that such a visit is consistent with their policies on China and Taiwan, China sees this as a threat to its One China policy. Taiwan accuses China of trying to alter the status quo. The tussle over Taiwan drew a swift response from China, with Beijing beginning its military exercises that include live fire drills in 6 zones surrounding Taiwan, also blocking trade of fish and fruit from Taiwan. Along with Taiwan, the international community is on edge too, with foreign ministers from the United States, UK, Japan, Canada, France, Germany, Italy saying in a joint statement that there is no justification to use a visit as pretext for aggressive military activity in the Taiwan Strait. Hello and welcome to the Full Context. My name is Hem Korsaro, and today on the show we try and figure out how the situation over Taiwan will play out and how far China will go to assert its control over Taiwan. Let's begin.
The US and the separatist forces for Taiwan independence should be responsible for all consequences arising from this. We will put our words into actions.
One controversial visit has set off a chain reaction. U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan ruffled China's feathers and has set off a firestorm of diplomatic reactions worldwide. The visit lasted around 18 hours, but the fallout continues. As we speak, China is carrying out extensive military drills completely surrounding Taiwan. On your screens right now, the 6 red blocks are the areas where China is conducting drills. At some points, the military exercises will be within just 20 kilometers of the island's shore. This includes long-range live ammunition shooting. Taiwan has said that Chinese forces fired multiple ballistic missiles into waters around Taiwan during military drills, which are set to continue till Sunday. Taiwan's military also said that its forces were closely monitoring the unprecedented drills taking place and was prepared for war, even though it would not seek it. And for more on this, we're now being joined by Lev Nachman, political analyst from Taiwan. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast. Now, what would you say of Taiwan's preparedness? Taiwan has reiterated time and again that it will not back down.
Yeah, Taiwan is taking a very defensive position. They've announced today that they're not seeking war, and I think that's important to realize that the entirety of the aggression coming from this is from the PRC's end.
All right. Now, Taiwan's military is on high alert, but let's just also talk about the people of Taiwan. How do you think this has affected their lives? Are they on edge, or do you think people remain largely unfazed till now?
People in Taiwan are not panicked in the way that I think a lot of the headlines we're reading really portray. You see a lot of rhetoric leaning into this word of crisis, and I think the word crisis is a little bit misleading because that infers that there must be domestic panic and that people are preparing for war. That's not happening here. People are living their lives just as much as they would be any other day. Of course, the military is in a heightened state of awareness, but there is no feeling of imminent war or imminent conflict. And it's important to remember that, these drills that are being conducted are just that. They're drills. They were announced days ago. They're not a surprise. We've known that they've been coming. And we knew that they would be using a escalated form of the military threats that we typically see. But these are also very reminiscent of the types of military drills that were conducted during the third Taiwan Strait crisis. So, even though these are definitely a concerning military escalation, the idea that there's going to be an invasion or there's going to be a military conflict are definitely overstated.
All right. Well, that being said, how do you see the situation playing out then in the next few days, at least till Sunday?
Like I said, we know that these drills are going to last till Sunday. We know there's going to be these types of missile tests being conducted around Taiwan. But this isn't a blockade with a capital B necessarily, because there are still flights coming in and out of Taiwan. They're avoiding the rectangles in which these drills are being conducted. But the idea that there's like a full-on blockade that no one can get in or out of Taiwan is not true.
All right. Well, Mr. Levnatman, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast.
Thank you.
Now, Nancy Pelosi's visit short but memorable. Despite warnings from China, the people of Taiwan were seen cheering on the streets as Pelosi's car drove by on Tuesday night. Despite the looming threat of conflict, Pelosi was greeted with warmth by both the political leaders and the residents of Taipei. Despite their foundational political differences, major parties in Taiwan also publicly welcomed Pelosi's arrival, including both President Tsai Ing-wen's pro-status quo Democratic Progressive Party and its main rival, the more Beijing-friendly. On Twitter, Tsai later shared a photograph of the welcome Pelosi received in Taiwan, which notably included her beloved chocolate ice cream. The sweet message seems a million miles away from the threat of war. What do Taipei residents really think? While some said that they are used to living in the shadow of Chinese aggression, others remained more skeptical of the visit. Listen in.
基本上不太会，因为目前来讲，它其实中国其实讲说要对台湾武力统治，其实已经讲很长的一段时间了。那只是说到目前为止，就我自己的观点而言，说它比较像是在转移它国内的一个民怨，它及实国内的人民的愤怒，它转移到台湾身上，把这个话题转移到台湾身上。那实际上而言，其实并没有太多说对台湾有太多的影响嘛。其实我觉得是还好。
这个就是他到台湾这边来作秀嘛，他们有选举的压力啊，到这边来反中，只要一反中票就高啊，他们那边自己内部严重，就是转移目标嘛。转移注意力嘛，让人家不会去注意他所谓的人权啊、通膨啊。我是希望每个人应该看得清楚啊，这些都是受到这些欧美国家的利用啊。
Now, the Chinese military exercises around Taiwan will not just affect the self-ruled island, but also the world. Analysts say that the drills are set to disrupt one of the world's busiest shipping zones, highlighting Taiwan's critical position in already stretched global supply chains. The shipping routes around Taiwan are used to supply key semiconductors and electronic equipment produced in East Asian hubs in the global markets. They also serve as a key artery for natural gas. According to media reports, nearly half the world's container ships pass through the narrow Taiwan Strait in the first 7 months of the year. The drills will cause delays and disruptions of supplies not just from Taiwan, but also have a direct impact on trade flow ties from South Korea and Japan. Taiwan's Maritime and Port Bureau has warned ships in northern, eastern and southern areas to avoid the areas being used for the drills. Immediately, Taiwan's SAIC Shipping and Transportation Index slumped by over 3%. But several shipping companies have told the media that they were waiting to see the impact of the drills before rerouting, as it would be riskier to divert ships through Philippine Sea due to the ongoing typhoon season. The drills have also impacted air routes. Over 400 flights were cancelled at major airports in Fujian, signaling that the airspace could be used by the military. Taiwan's cabinet has warned that the exercises would disrupt 18 international routes passing through its flight information region. While many experts believe that China will try to ensure that the supply chains are not disrupted, as it is the biggest exporter in the world, this closing economic activity for a long term will likely hurt Beijing's interests. But even a short disruption will likely cause long-term impact on the supply chain, which are already strained due to the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine and, of course, the pandemic disruptions as well. Now, apart from military intimidation, China has turned to the familiar playbook of trade restrictions in order to punish Taiwan for Speaker Pelosi's visit. So far, Chinese authorities have suspended imports of Taiwanese fruit and fish and exports of sand. Beijing's economic sanctions, however, have left Taiwan's most valuable export untouched: semiconductors. That's because China depends on these small chips almost as much as Taiwan does itself. For Beijing, targeting Taiwan's semiconductor industry would come at the cost of inflicting significant harm on itself. But just how important are semiconductors to Taiwan? The answer is very. Taiwan leads the global industry for semiconductors. They are critical components used in everything from smartphones to medical devices to cars and even fighter jets. It produces 64% of all semiconductors, followed by South Korea at 18%. For the most advanced semiconductors, Taiwan accounts for 92% of the production. Since the country is only officially recognized in 13 countries in the Vatican, the importance of the semiconductor industry to Taiwan's economy cannot be overstated. Semiconductors make up nearly 40% of exports and about 15% of its GDP. This dominance also increases Taipei's strategic importance for countries like the United States. Hence, China, if it had sanctioned Taiwan's semiconductor sector, it would have done considerable damage. But it did not. Why? That's because China accounts for 60% of the global demand for semiconductors. Over 90% of the demand is met by imports and foreign firms with production in the country. China controls about 9% of the chip market. Could China target semiconductors in the future? How long Taiwan semiconductors' dominance may last is uncertain. Chinese President Xi Jinping has described the reliance on foreign technology as the greatest hidden danger facing the country and pledged to increase its self-sufficiency. But experts say Taiwan's chip-making industry remains safe till China gears up its manufacturing capacity. Now for more on this, Andrew K.P. Lung, international and independent strategist live from Hong Kong, is joining us on this broadcast. Thank you so much for your time. What is your take on the angry response from China? Would you say an escalation over a diplomatic visit is warranted?
There is no doubt Beijing wants to punish Taiwan for having received Nancy Pelosi's visit, in spite of very stern warnings from the president downwards against such a move, because it is seen to be hollowing out the one China policy and enabling Taiwan to veer towards a degree of de facto independence or even de jure independence. So these military exercises are quite unprecedented in the sense that they straddle about 6 exercise regions surrounding the Taiwan island, as if it is a military blockade, even though it lasts for a number of days. And obviously, during this exercise period, Taiwan will be shut off and supply chains will be disrupted during this period. But I don't think that it would veer towards a war, because right from the beginning, both the United States and China cannot afford a war at this time because of the coming November main events for both countries. In the case of the United States, it's the midterm elections. In the case of Beijing, it's the National People's Congress, which is supposed to confirm President Xi's third term and also unveil a new party leadership. So I think both countries want to avoid a war, but nevertheless, Beijing has got to do something drastic as a warning to Taiwan, but not very dangerous postures, which would feel moving towards independence.
Right. In fact, I was just going to come to that. Thanks for clarifying that. How has this situation, in your opinion, impacted Xi Jinping domestically?
Well, I think that before Nancy Pelosi's visit, the whole of the Chinese people were supportive of this very stern warning by the party, by President Xi, even in conversations with President Biden. But then Nancy Pelosi's visit did take place as if this is as not a poke in the eye of China. So there is some degree of dissatisfaction or unhappiness. And of course, Beijing has got to really ratchet up the rhetoric and the actions to show that Beijing is able to really exercise some sanctions on Taiwan. So apart from these military exercises, there are already certain Taiwanese products which were being sanctioned, even products to Hong Kong. So I think that this is an all-out exercise to give a stern warning, and also the
Right. Well, also joining us right now on this broadcast is Dmitry Babish, a political analyst, a Russian international news agency, Sputnik. Thank you so much for joining us live right now. And now my first question to you is, the war in Ukraine has renewed focus on Taiwan Strait. With the latest escalation, what sort of impact do you think this will have on Russia-China relations, and what sort of responses can we expect going forward?
Well, of course, there are obvious similarities between Ukraine and Taiwan, even though I think that Russians and Chinese themselves understand that these are very different situations. But seen from Washington, seen from the European Union, their picture is black and white. There is good Ukraine and bad Russia. There is good Taiwan and bad China. And of course, this kind of vision from the Western powers brings Russia and China closer to each other. Even though, let me remind you that historically, China never had allies and never needed allies. There was just a brief period of good relations, of friendship between Mao and Stalin. Otherwise, China always acted on its own. However, I think that right now the situation is exceptional. The conduct of the United States was so provocative. I mean, this visit by Ms. Pelosi, it was absolutely unprovoked. It was unneeded. It was of no use. And out of nothing, the Americans created a problem. So in this situation, I think China may ponder a closer kind of relationship with Russia, even though this is not in their Chinese tradition to have allies.
All right, so how do you see the situation panning out going forward?
I think a lot will depend on the developments in Ukraine. The war there is getting more and more cruel. And unfortunately, there is little understanding of how dangerous this war is on the Western side. The West keeps supplying Ukraine more and more destructive weapons that can hit deep into Russian territory, that can hit all the territory of Ukraine, which has been put under control by the Russian troops. So I think China will be watching what's going on in Ukraine, and the West will be watching. To my mind, the best solution is some kind of a compromise between Kiev and Moscow that would calm the passions, not only here, but also in the Taiwan Straits. But right now, Mr. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, says that he doesn't need any negotiation. He doesn't accept any compromise. He hopes to win. At least that's what we hear from him and from his Western sponsors.
All right. Well, Mr. Dmitry Babish, thank you so much for joining us with your analysis on this. Once again, we're being joined by Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. Thank you so much for staying on with us. Now, how do you see the situation playing out in the days to come? It is a period of heightened tensions. What does this mean for regional stability and order?
Well, I think that the Beijing seems to be taking advantage of this opportunity to regularize these unprecedented military exercises around Taiwan, which can in some way amounts to a blockade, and also is a rehearsal of a possible future Taiwan invasion as a robust response to this unprecedented, unprovoked visit by Nancy Pelosi. But on the other hand, Beijing, as I said at the beginning, doesn't want a war because of the coming November National People's Congress. Neither does the United States want a war, but there is no doubt that the relationship between China and the United States and between Beijing and Taiwan seem to be on the downturn.
All right, Mr. K.P. Leung, thank you so much for joining us on The Full Context with your analysis.
Thank you.
Now, you might be wondering, why has China reacted so strongly to a visit by a US political leader? For that, here's a quick history lesson explaining Taiwan and China's decades-long conflict. Where is Taiwan located? It's an island roughly 100 miles from the coast of southeast China. It sits in the so-called first island chain, which includes a list of US-friendly territories that are crucial to America's foreign policy. Has Taiwan always been separate from China? Historical sources suggest that the island first came under full Chinese control in the 17th century, but in 1895, they gave up the island to Japan after losing the First Sino-Japanese War. China took the island again in 1945 after Japan lost World War II. Then a civil war erupted in mainland China between nationalist government and forces led by Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong's Communist Party. The Communists won in 1949, took control in Beijing. Chiang Kai-shek and what was left of the Nationalist Party, known as the Kuomintang, fled to Taiwan, where they ruled for the next several decades. Now, China points to this part of history to say that Taiwan was originally a Chinese province, but the Taiwanese point to the same history and say that they were never part of the modern Chinese state that was first formed after the revolution in 1911, or the People's Republic of China that was established under Mao in 1949. China sees Taiwan as a breakaway province that will eventually be under Beijing's control again. However, Taiwan disagrees. It sees itself as an independent country with its own constitution and democratically elected leaders. China's President Xi Jinping has said reunification with Taiwan must be fulfilled and has not ruled out the possible use of force to achieve it. Why is the West against China ruling over Taiwan? Now, Western experts say China taking over the island would allow Beijing to more easily project power in the Western Pacific region and could possibly even threaten US military bases as far away as Guam and Hawaii. But China insists that its intentions are purely peaceful. Currently, only 13 countries plus the Vatican recognize Taiwan as a sovereign country. China exerts a considerable diplomatic pressure on other countries not to recognize Taiwan or to do anything which implies recognition. And with that, we call a wrap on this edition of The Full Context. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.